Well, hello there, you scrub lords. It's been a little while since I've done one of these scrub chats, so I figured we'd better do another one. There's been a couple of things that have come up over the past few weeks and past couple of months since I did one of these. Has it been a couple of months? I think it has been. So today we're going to be discussing a couple of topics that I found quite interesting. The first one is going to be Japanese tanks, or at least the 3 vehicles we have, or the 4 vehicles, technically 5, whatever number of vehicles we have confirmed so far. This is probably going to be like some sort of kind of esque devlog chats on these vehicles, but I'll get into why they really aren't here in a moment. And then the second one is the main topic of today, and that is, are German 6.7 vehicles overpowered? And I'm talking about ground forces here, not talking about aircraft. That's a completely different ball game, and I have no experience or no real grasp of that area. So we're talking about ground forces today. So as for the very first topic, which we'll dive right into here, a quick disclaimer, this isn't really a devblog chats episode, and I'm sure a lot of you have been wondering where the devblog chats episodes have been. And there's a bit of an explanation for that. For those of you who pay attention to my Facebook page and frequent that, then you'll already know what's coming. And, well, you could basically just skip ahead. Basically, the short answer is I know nothing about Japanese tanks, other than a couple by name and some basic capabilities from other games I've played, like Men of War Assault Squad 1 and 2. Other than that, my knowledge of Japanese armor and their history is almost non-existent. I know I'm not the only one out there. Most of us in general have very, very little knowledge of Japanese ground forces and why they developed certain ways, why they made this decision rather than that decision. I can rattle off why I can give you a short lecture on why the Tiger 1 doesn't have sloped armor. But I haven't the faintest idea why the Japanese decided to build these monstrous, huge, heavy tanks, and what their thought processes were behind that. So, in regards to Japanese ground forces, I am very excited for them. I want to put that out there. First and foremost, I am pumped for Japanese ground forces. It's gonna bring something new to the table, hopefully, something different, something that will basically break the meta, sort of what's going on with the current ground forces setup. Now, I know that some people, and actually a lot of people, don't have very high hopes for Japanese ground forces, but I very much do. I really hope that these Japanese vehicles, while different and while maybe challenging, are still going to be quite fun and quite engaging to play. I'm also quite interested in the performance, especially of their Tier 4 to Tier 5 vehicles. Their Tier 1s, 2s, and 3s don't really concern me all that much. I can't imagine they're going to be that ridiculous or that overpowered. Maybe the OI might be a little bit interesting, but other than that, there aren't very many Japanese tanks that I'm ridiculously excited for at those mid to low tiers. For me, all the excitement lies in the upper tier vehicles, the upper rungs of the Japanese tank tech tree, which should hopefully turn out to be one of the most interesting of all of the current trees in the game that we have for ground forces. Now, as for the vehicles that we have so far, we've got, well, technically 5, but I'll talk about 4 here. These are the 4 recent ones from the dev blogs, and that is the Kami, the Chinu, the STA-1, and the Chiha. Now, I'm going to be the first to admit here that the Kami and the Chiha don't really interest me all that much. They look pretty boring, and I'm not going to be the first one to say that I can't wait to get through these vehicles so I can actually play something I'd like to call a tank. And the first one of those that we have so far, really, is the Chinu. And I knew the Chinu was going to be in the game, and I'm not surprised that they're putting it in the game. If they didn't have it in the game, I'd actually be more surprised than now that they do. And my thoughts on the Chiha, or not the Chiha, the Chinu, I'm going to get these names mixed up all day, is that, well, it looks to be pretty average. it looks cool. It's got an interesting design, as Japanese tank designers had some quite interesting ideas on their vehicles. And it looks to be roughly the equivalent, in my opinion, to a slightly taller Panzer IV, which is not a bad thing. The Panzer IV is a very, very good tank used in the right hands, and the Chi-Nu should be no different. The STA-1, it should be a very good vehicle. I mean, like, they basically compared it in the dev blog to the M46 Patton, so that should be interesting to see what kind of ammunition choices it has, whether or not it has the really good Heat FS round or the 210mm Heat round as its top ammunition. We will have to wait and see. However, having a vehicle that performs similarly to the M46, not a bad thing. And I know that a lot of the Japanese late tier 4s and tier 5s are going to be much like the German tier 4s and 5s, actually. They went down a very, very similar development path, especially in regards to their top vehicle, which I'm calling it right now as the Type 74 main battle tank, which is essentially a Japanese Leopard 1. It's got the same gun, the L7, I believe it's an A3, but I could be wrong. It's a variant of the British L7 105mm gun. It'll have APDS, HESH, and most likely Heat FS as well. If they don't give it one of those ammunition types, I'm going to be very confused. And then, as for their top tier heavy, we're most likely going to see the Type 4/5 heavy. Unlike the distinction that World of Tanks makes, that doesn't. The Type 4/5 heavy are the same tank. They just split them up into two vehicles for World of Tanks because they were running out of options. So it's going to be a very, very similar setup to the Germans, really. I can't imagine it's going to be that much different. However, I'm interested to see how the Type 74 measures up against the Leopard, which is going to be its main counterpart. It's going to be pretty mobile like the Leopard. Armor, not particularly good, but we'll have to see exactly what kind of armor values the Type 74 has. And we'll have to also keep an eye out for how maneuverable it is and a few other factors. So, I mean, again, these Japanese vehicles, while they don't seem that impressive, at least right now, at least in the vehicles that we know are coming into the game, undoubtedly, we're going to see some very, very interesting vehicles, especially in the sort of prototype area. I know a lot of people are really against the whole adding prototypes into War Thunder kind of a thing, especially since it's a game that sort of, that basically prides itself on realism to a point. And frankly, I don't mind, this is my personal view on prototypes, I don't mind prototypes being introduced into the game, as long as they are introduced in a balanced manner, and as long as there is a need for it. If there is literally no need whatsoever, like if there was no need whatsoever to put the mouse in the game, then I would prefer that they didn't. However, there was a need at the time, but that's a completely separate topic, which I might actually get a little bit into in the next major topic here. But anyway, adding in like the OI, the experimental heavy tank, and those monstrous Japanese heavies that we're most likely going to see at tier 3, 4, and 5, some people are going to hate them. I can already say that right now. The saltiness is going to be real, people. But it's important to understand that, especially in like the tier 4 area, the Japanese tank development is quite muddy, because really most of their quote-unquote production vehicles that they built in relatively large numbers only go up to about tier 3, and then they stop. Is simply because, well, the war ended, and the most of the prototype, like, massively wild imagination vehicles that were actually built into prototypes were kept on the mainland, because, like I've said in previous videos, especially my previous Scub Chats video, which you should definitely go check out if you want more in-depth history on Japanese tanks. Well, my guess at their history, I should probably say, is that it's very difficult to move such heavy vehicles around the mainland. And like they say in the dev blog for the STA-1, vehicles like that were designed with the purpose of being light and easily transportable. So that way they could easily move them across mountainous terrain through railroads along throughout the Japanese continent. So again, it'll be interesting to see how those sets of requirements influence the development of Japanese vehicles, and how the Japanese vehicle mindset is going to change between late tier 3, mid to late tier 4, and then early to late tier 5. So again, we'll have to keep an eye out. We'll have to watch for that sort of thing. So we're going to move on to our next topic here, and our final topic of today, and this is going to be a bit of a rant. So fair warning for those of you guys who just don't like that sort of thing. So I was just perusing on Reddit. I had gotten home from work and I was a little bit bored. And I came across a post by, what's his name again? Let me check here. He put up, the guy who put this up says the following. I just want to say I'm done. You can't out heavy the Tiger 2s, and you can't outflank them because there are Panther 2s just as fast already waiting. You should have been playing this game for a long time before 1.25. I can't honestly remember the original build when I started, yada yada yada. This level of discrepancy is stupid. This is the least amount of fun I've had in 4+ years of the game. Sorry for venting. That's not the issue. The major question that came out of this, and that a lot of people are debating down in the comments, including myself, are the German 6.7 lineups overpowered? Is the current lineup, or the standard lineup of Panther 2 and King Tigers completely overpowered? In my personal opinion, and in my personal short answer, no, they are not overpowered. However, there's a slightly longer answer that I'm going to get into. Like I said, this is a bit of a rant. The biggest issue that people seem to have with the Germans is the fact that the Germans seem to have a counter for almost everything. They seem to have something that will that they can throw out there that will go toe-to-toe with anything else that anybody can bring. The Tiger 2H is considered to be, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion, the best heavy tank at tier 4. And rightfully so. It's got great armor, great mobility, and a great gun. The best gun, in fact, of that tier, hands down. However, there are plenty of weaknesses of the Tiger 2. It's sluggish. It can get going at a reasonable click, but it needs some time to get up to that speed. As a result, it's not going to get to the battle first. Well, I can already hear you guys saying, well, what about the Panther 2? The Panther 2 is more than fast enough. Yes, it is. And the Panther 2 gets to those objectives and gets to those points relatively quickly. The problem with the Panther 2 is that it has this crappy Schmalturm turret, which couldn't block a fucking paper plate if you threw it at it. I mean, the Schmalturm turret is awful. And any Panther 2 drivers will tell you that if anything even looks in your general direction, bouncing it is a pain in the ass. It is possible, but it is a pain in the ass. And especially if you have APHE rounds fired at you, a single penetration tends to knock out your turret ring, knock out your cannon breach, and kill your gunner, loader, and commander all in one go. This is not new for Panther drivers. However, the Panther 2 is different because it's got slightly better hull armor than a regular Panther. It's got 100mm at the front, and I believe it is 60mm on the side, if I can remember correctly. And frankly, it's a pretty good combination. It's got mobility, it's got some decent armor, it's got a really, really good gun. Like I said, probably the best gun at tier 4. But again, the armor is still subpar compared to a lot of other vehicles at the tier. The hull armor is okay, but the thing is the hull armor is super vulnerable to HESH rounds from British high-tier 7.0 vehicles. Super vulnerable to HESH. The lower glacis on both the Tiger 2, the Panther, and the Jagd Tiger, for that matter, are all massive weak spots, and if you fire a decent-sized APHE round in there with a good explosive filler, you're going to wreck that vehicle, even if you don't penetrate the turret on these said vehicles or the crew compartment. There are many ways to counter these vehicles. The problem is that everybody tries to measure their tanks up to the Tiger 2 and tries to do what the Tiger 2 does. and they fail. Because the Tiger II is best at what it does. And that is standing and slugging it out at medium to long range. At closer ranges, you've got vehicles like the T-29, which have got the straight-up thickness of turret armor to generally block most of the shots that are fired at it. The IS-2, not so much. The IS-2 is kind of a weird oddball, because it doesn't have very good armor. I think we can all agree on that. I mean, even the Mod 44, the hull armor is pretty good, but the lower glacis armor is garbage. It's got fuel tanks right behind it, so you can set it on fire all the time. The turret can occasionally bounce some shots, but it's not reliable. And if anybody gets even a remote side shot on you, you blow up. It's that simple. However, the IS-2 should not be played in the traditional heavy tank role. It simply cannot fight and expect to win on a regular basis the types of fights that you would normally see in, let's say, between a T-29 and a Tiger II. A T-29 can fight a Tiger II one-on-one and win on a decent number of occasions. It's generally about a 50-50 chance whether or not the T-29 is going to win. Some say it would be 60-40 favoring the T-29, and you could make that argument. But the point is that people play the IS-2 wrong, and whenever I get around to an IS-2 review, which it is going to be at some point in the future, I'm definitely going to have to address this, because people try and play the IS-2 like a King Tiger. It's not a King Tiger. It is everything but a King Tiger. It plays completely differently to a King Tiger. You've got a single-shot gun with massive potential damage. However, the sacrifice that you make for that is a massively long reload time. And if you are stuck out in the open in a gunnery duel at medium to long range in a Tiger 2, against a Tiger, even at close range, against a Tiger 2 head-on, you're doing it wrong. I'm sorry. You're fucked. Like, you've put yourself in that position, you're fucked. And you deserve to die. It's just that simple. The only vehicle that can go toe-to-toe with a King Tiger head-on and win most of those battles, like about 80% of the time, or 90% of the time, is the IS-3. And they've already tried to put the IS-3 at a lower battle rating, and it was the balancing was literally so bad that I remember I witnessed a platoon of 3 IS-3s get every single kill in a game. I think they had something like 24 or 25 kills between them. Granted, I was on their team that match, but I didn't get a single kill because they literally just wiped the floor with the German teams, because the Germans really don't have that big of a counter to the to vehicles like the IS-3. I mean, potentially you could flank it, but that's dubious at best, because the IS-3 is quite fast. The only frontal weak spot it has is a tiny driver's hatch, which is not even guaranteed to go in if you hit it. The only way to really guarantee a penetration on that is to sort of do like a sort of hacksawed or improvised ricochet off of the lower gun mantlet and down into that driver's hatch, and that doesn't happen on a regular basis. You can't count on a lucky ricochet to kill an enemy vehicle. So where the IS-3 stands out is in straight up frontal hull armor, and the Tiger II really struggles against it. And where the IS-3 is at, it's not ideal, but the thing is, that's the only way to keep the IS-3 balanced, in my opinion, because if you drop that thing to a 6.7, it could probably be put to a 7.0, although any vehicles that are at 6.7, cough cough FV4202, are really going to have a bad day. The IS-3, you cannot put the IS-3 at a 6.7 battle rating and expect it to be balanced. The Tiger II, you can, because the Tiger II has massive weak spots that you can exploit, and the Tiger II has weaknesses that you can exploit. One weakness that doesn't get brought up very often with the Tiger II, and that has been pointed out on numerous occasions recently, which to me, this didn't actually occur to me until very, very recently when one of my friends pointed it out, is that the elevation speed on the Tiger II, on all of the Tigers and most of the German tanks, is awful. Like, I don't know if you've seen the elevation speed on the Tiger II, but with my ace crew maxed out, all the skills level 5 and and 5+5+ ace crew, it's only 2 degrees per second, up and down. Meaning that if you catch a Tiger 2 in a lower elevation or a higher elevation, and he doesn't immediately have his gun sitting at that elevation, it's going to take him a little bit, unless he's got a very, 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 very good crew, like I have on mine, to swing the gun and get those rounds on target, giving you the opportunity to get a free shot, basically. This is what I'm talking about. You have to analyze these vehicles in a very, very deep manner if you're that concerned about them. And frankly, you shouldn't be that concerned about them, because the Tiger 2H is not overpowered, the Panther 2 is not overpowered, the SLA-16 Tiger 2 is a little bit, I'd say it's a little bit on the too good side, simply because you get medium tank mobility in a heavy tank, which is pretty ridiculous. And you could easily make an argument that that vehicle is overpowered to a certain extent, but it's not overpowered to the extent that it needs drastic changes to the battle rating. And basically, I'm saying all this in response to a comment and an ongoing conversation I'm having with this guy. I'm trying to remember what his name is. I think it's JDam on Reddit, and JDam is super salty about 6.7s. Basically, he wrote like a 3 or 4 paragraph thing, and at the very end he says the last paragraph is the following: downvote me all you want, but the Tiger 2P should be 6.7, the Tiger 2H and Panther 2 should be 7.0. Tiger 2 10.5 should be 7.3, because the IS-3 is also technically a World War II tank, but unlike glorious Nazi fantasy, Tiger was actually built, so Wereboost can suck a dick. Well, first of all, that was not very kind language, sir, but second of all, the Tiger 2s were built. The 10.5, no, it wasn't. I can give you that. The Panther 2 in its current form, no, it wasn't. I can give you that. But the Tiger 2H and the Tiger 2P, the Tiger 2P, I think it's fine at 6.3. It's got very, very weak turret armor for that tier, which is easily penetrable. The Tiger 2H has flat turret face, and we all know how flat armor is in War Thunder. Again, I just don't see the major issue here. Like, the IS-2 1944, like, basically the way this guy is putting it is that the IS-2 1944 should be on an equal playing field to the Tiger 2. It's not. We can, Jadam, we can both, or Jadman, I'm sorry, I've been pronouncing your name wrong. Both vehicles play completely different strengths. They were designed for two different things. The IS-2 was designed, especially when it had, or the IS-2 when it was upgunned to the 122mm gun. The idea behind mounting this large 122mm gun was not necessarily to engage enemy tanks. It was to engage soft targets with a large, high explosive round. And the problem that creates in War Thunder is that, well, very rarely are you going to be firing high explosive at anything. All of your performance relies on your armor piercing, and the APHE on Russian tanks is notorious for being the most powerful APHE rounds in the game. So why is it such an issue that the IS-2 Mod 1944 is having against the Tiger 2? Well, the problem is, Jadman, is that people keep playing these vehicles like a Tiger 2, or they keep trying to play them like a Tiger 2. They keep trying to play them as a brawler, medium range sniper, and they're trying to go head to head with a Tiger 2, and they're losing, badly, because again, like I've said earlier, that's not how you play an IS-2. You get the jump on people, you attack him from different elevations, you use your mobility, because the IS-2's mobility is quite good for a heavy tank. It's on par, if not better, than the Tiger 2H, so you can generally get to positions at either relatively the same time or even a little bit faster. But you have to use your head when you're fighting Tiger 2Hs, or when you're fighting the Germans in general. Actually, if you're anybody, you have to use your head. It's not a point-and-click adventure game for the Germans. I mean, contrary to popular belief, and contrary to what some people may think, playing German tanks is not as easy as it looks. And if putting your vehicle into a position where you can do the most damage to the enemy team while minimizing it to yourself isn't in and of itself the art and what separates good players from bad players in War Thunder. I'm not saying that this Jadman guy is a bad player. He very well could be a very good player. The problem is that he is totally and utterly convinced that the game is at fault here, and it can't possibly be him. The first step in becoming a becoming a good player in general is realizing, hey, maybe it's not the game, maybe it's me. How can I figure out a way to fix this situation? And if I can't figure out a way to fix the situation, I'm going to go do something else until I can come up with a way to come back and fix that. I mean, that's the way I play. And that's the part of the reason why I avoid 6.0 battle ratings in general, because 6.0 battle ratings are pretty mediocre tier for most vehicles, because tier 4 is the most popular level in the game that is played right now in ground forces. And what that means is that if you're playing a 6.0, you are effectively putting yourself automatically on the bottom rung of the matchmaker for that area of the game. And because that player base is so populated, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, it's a very, very good thing that we have so many players now, or as many players as we do, but because you're putting yourself at 6.0, you're putting yourself at a massive disadvantage, because your vehicle is generally very, very good when it's top tier, but when it's bottom tier, it is generally useless. The Tiger E is a good example of that. The FV4-202 is a okay example of that. The Panzerbefehlswagen 6P is a good example of that. The T-25 is a good example of that. The Jumbo 76 is a good example of that. I could go on and on and on about those particular vehicles. But again, the Germans are not overpowered. They just have a greater assortment of tools for anti-tank work, because, frankly, the Germans had a target-rich environment, and there was a lot of fucking tanks. I mean, just look at some of the SPGs that they came up with. You've got the Martyr series, you've got vehicles like the Nashorn, you've got the Flak Bus. I mean, a lot of these vehicles were stopgap measures, essentially, to stem the tide of massive tank onslaughts, which they were facing. The Allies, just the Western Allies alone, had more tanks than Germany produced in the entire war. The Russian, and then that's not even counting the Russians. The Russians built even more than that, than the Western Allies. It's just insane if you think about the production values. So it's not too far off the mark to wonder why the Germans went to these very, very powerful vehicles. Granted, not particularly reliable vehicles, but very powerful vehicles nonetheless. That when they worked, they could kill and fight any tank on the battlefield, because that's what they were fucking designed to do. I know I'm talking myself into circles here, but like I said, rant mode. And so the point is, why German 6.7 and German vehicles in general are not overpowered. They're very strong, but they're not overpowered. And those people who are utterly convinced that there is a Russian bias, a British bias, or American bias, for God forbid if you're just that terrible, or German bias, check yourselves first before you blame the game. And rant. Okay, guys, wow, holy shit, that went from about a 10-minute video to a 30-minute video. In any case, I want to hear your guys' discussions down in the comments section. What do you think of the current situation at Tier 4? Do you think it's balanced? How do you propose you fix it? What are some other suggestions that you guys have, other than, say, moving the Germans to 7.0 and breaking their matchmaker, as this guy was suggesting? Let me know down in the comments section. In any case, keep your tracks checked, keep your binos in place, keep a round on the tube, and I will see you guys in the next video.